Three. Hello and welcome to another edition of the C-Squared Podcast. Your host Curtis with my co-host Aaliyah, and we are back again with Kevin Stewart-Panko, our sometimes co-host, who is joining us today to discuss music criticism. It's because Aaliyah has recently started reading a book about music criticism. It was written back in the 1800s, so she thought it'd be an interesting topic to do. So with that, we are going to start it off with Aaliyah to lead us into the proceedings.
Disclaimer, audiobook. I'm not actually reading it. Audiobook.
Same shit.
Audiobook. I'm
Same
cheating.
shit.
But yeah, so I just started listening to this audiobook called How to Listen to Music, written in 1895. Kevin and I were both surprised that they even had music journalism back then, but I guess it makes sense. They have newspapers, so
and music.
and music, yeah. So why not?
Somebody's got to complain about it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I guess I want to take kind of a two-pronged approach with this discussion. Firstly, I'm thinking the topic we can help music journalists who want to think more about hone their craft. And also we can kind of maybe help musicians understand how reviewers listen to their music. So maybe they don't take negative reviews so personally, or just maybe see it from a different perspective. So hopefully it can be helpful in some regard.
All right.
I guess I'll start with a quote. I'm just going to skip to this quote too that I listed here. And then we'll kind of talk about it. He says that it is even more obvious that there is something radically wrong with the present systems of musical instruction. It is because of a plentiful lack of knowledge that so much that is written on music is without meaning, and that the most foolish kind of rhapsody, so it show a collocation of fine words, is permitted to masquerade as musical criticism and even analysis. What do you think about that?
Guilty.
Just put some pretty words together.
Well, I think that, okay, so let's back up a bit. I think that when we talk about, I think the original sort of way that Curtis framed this earlier today was how to listen to music critically or something like that. Yeah. I think that one thing that we have to sort of look at is, reframe the idea of listening to music critically doesn't necessarily have to mean negatively. I think inherently the word criticism involves negativity.
Right. Nowadays, it tends to be associated with negativity, right?
Right. So I think that that's one thing. I don't know if you want to call it a myth I want to dispel, but like one thing I kind of want to clarify, that listening to something critically or intently or closely or whatever doesn't have to be equated with negativity. What was the other thing I was going to say? I was going to say something else too. Oh, I think, okay. So in regards to that quote, there are two things about it that sort of jumped out at me, like when I first read it. Now, it's ironic that this sort of came up the other day when I was talking to somebody or interviewing somebody, I don't know, but they were just kind of going on about how old school death metal versus new school death metal, and the fact that what you have now, a lot of younger bands these days are learning from instructional YouTube videos, as opposed to, I like these, however many number of bands all from different sort of genres, and we're making this stuff up as we go along, like they did in the late 80s, early 90s, as opposed to there's all this history that you can go back and look at, and you can look at some dude teaching you how to sweep pick arpeggios and blast beats and gravity blasts and all that kind of stuff on YouTube, and you're kind of, I think in some way you're at a disadvantage. And it kind of plays into the first part of that quote about there's something radically wrong with the present systems of musical instruction, where it's just like people are kind of jumping on what already exists and sort of just, all right, here we go. I'm just going to do this because that's what I think this genre of music is supposed to be about.
Yeah,
okay.
Like maybe doing things without fully understanding how it got to that point in the first place.
There's that, yeah. There's also a lack. I mean, I'm being very I'm making like kind of sweeping generalized statements, but there's a lack of like daringness or willing to step outside of that sort of codified, whatever tunnel vision that you get with really sort of strict formal instruction. I mean, you always hear the stories of bands talking about, I learned all this theory, but then when I went started writing songs, I threw out the theory and just kind of went with my gut, or went with what sounded good and that kind of stuff. So I guess that plays into it. But sorry, going to the actual analysis, criticism, whatever part, like I said, guilty. I mean, like I have made no bones about it ever that I just like entertaining myself when I try and write and create comparisons with bands and compare them to certain things that people wouldn't normally imagine or think of, or make myself laugh or whatever. I mean, if that's not real music criticism according to Henry Edward Kreibel, then fuck you, Henry Edward Kreibel. I don't care. It's like, I'm not doing this for anybody, like in my case anyway, I'm not doing this for anybody really but myself. I mean, I like to help bands out, and I like to help labels out, and I like to help people out, and I like to, whatever, but I kind of just, I've always done it because that's what I like to do. Now, I think one of the huge differences with this quote, or not huge difference, but one of the things that stands out for me with this quote is that I think when you're using, as he says, a collocation of fine words permitted to masquerade as musical criticism, that's cool. And that's, I guess he's getting his point across as being disparaging and stuff, but I think there's a certain amount of repetition. There's a certain amount of whatever that's going to come with the volume of stuff that I am exposed to and have to write about on a monthly basis. Like there's only so, like I make this stupid joke all the time about, and I'm not the only one who does it, but I make this stupid joke all the time about how there's only so many synonyms for the word brutal. Right.
Right.
So I can only describe a band as brutal, or using that word so many times before it's like, all right, well, now I'm gonna have to think of something else. And I guess if that's not serious criticism, or if that's not,
I don't think that that's what he's saying. I think he
all right, well, tell me what he's saying.
clarifies it a little later. That's not exactly what he's saying. But he did mention, and I guess that's a huge difference between 1894 music journalism and today's music journalism. They probably had a crap ton more time to write about stuff back then.
Yep.
Than we do, and than you do. You're having to do so many articles in 1 week. Totally different in that regard. But just going back to that music criticism point, I think that this is, he kind of clarified like who this book was for, and he said it's not for people who are musicians. It's not for people who are like music professors or something. It's not about technical assessment of music. He says that it's more about taking on the approach that yielding the common conception of entertainment in favor of the higher enjoyment, which springs from serious contemplation of beautiful things. So that is like kind of what you were talking about. Critically listening is serious contemplation of what you're listening to. Do you feel like that's kind of the difference between, or maybe just what do you feel is the difference between someone who's just listening to music for entertainment value versus somebody who's listening to music for the purpose of writing a critique of it?
I think that if you're so somebody who's listening for the sheer sake of just enjoyment, which I hope we all still do. I mean, I think that it allows you to sort of just put something on and not have to consider, it's like the background, its influences, its place in a broader context, like the musicological aspect of it. You don't have to do that. You can just put it on. And I do this with stuff that I, don't necessarily like, music that you wouldn't think that somebody wearing, what am I wearing today? A Wormrot hoodie would listen to. I put on stuff and I'm like, all right, I don't have to think about 38 Special. I can just put on 38 Special and yeah, country rock, cool. You know what I mean? And rock out. I don't have to, you know, if someone wants me to write about something, that's a different thing. Because normally there's like, okay, well, you know, there's a word count. You got to throw some stuff in there. You got to like throw in some context. You got to throw in like background. Where's this coming from? Especially, you know, if it's a band that has like, you know, if they're on their 5th record, comparisons to the past, how they've grown, how they've developed, if they have, where, you know, possibly where they're going. There's more to it, I guess, because there needs to be more to it, as opposed to I like 38 Special because they rock. You know what I mean? And that's not really a review that anyone's going to pay me to write, but that's what I think of when I put on, you know, Wild Eyed Southern Boys or some shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't know if that helps or answers the
Absolutely.
question.
Absolutely. There's a lot more context that you have to consider then when you're writing
Right.
a review.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I would kind of, I'd be interested to hear like people who like yourself who yourselves who aren't doing what I do, but are still involved to whatever your degree, but also still I'm you know, read reviews and all that kind of stuff. What do you see in reviews that you like or dislike, or what do you look for? Do you look for something specific, or are you just kind of like, you know, you read something and go, okay, I'm just going to kind of go with whatever this person has and just sort of enjoy what they're writing, and then possibly check out this record at the end of the day?
Ooh, I want to answer first.
All right.
Okay.
Because I'm the only non-musician here, so I know literally nothing about music other than the fact that I get paid to promote it. So what I'm looking for is just like one thing that Corey does really well. I'm going to shout Corey out is she talks about how the music makes her feel when she's writing, and the type of emotion that you get from it, and kind of like the feelings that you get from listening to it. What I do not like is when it gets all technical and they start, you know, talking about how they're playing and stuff like that, because I don't know anything about that. I literally don't. Like I have no idea. So from a fan perspective, I'm looking for the comparisons, like you said, to other bands. And I'm also looking for like, you know, like how does it make them feel emotionally, that type of thing. That's me personally.
Okay.
Yeah. And even as a musician, I would say it's kind of the same. Like a lot of times I like listening to the music and forming my own opinion. I never just take an author's word for at face value, you know, for my own opinion. But sometimes, especially if I like an album, I'm curious to read what the negative reviews say. If it's well written and critically written, not like haters, but like real journalism that's negative about it, I'm curious to read that and hear what people have to say about it, just to kind of balance out my perspective, because sometimes I can get over enthusiastic about stuff that I like, and like maybe I need to reel it back a little bit.
Nothing wrong with that though. Nothing
I
wrong
don't
with that
know.
at all. No, nothing wrong with that at all.
I just like having a more balanced perspective. So.
I like enthusiasm like that. One thing, okay, so Kevin, I just have I'm kind of curious, what's your opinion like when you're reading reviews? Like, what are you looking for? If you do.
I definitely do.
Cool.
I'm not looking, I mean, it's different for me because I generally probably have either heard or like I have most of what I'm reading about. I've already had it for like 3 or 4 months.
True.
So I've heard this record however many times, or, you know, it's been sitting there waiting to be listened to. So I don't, you know, and I get the press kits and stuff. So I don't really need the comparisons in a review. But that's me because, you know, the volume of stuff I get, plus the way I receive that stuff. I look for, I think it's the same thing with Aaliyah. Like I kind of, with records that I enjoy or don't like or whatever, that I just kind of like to see what other people, you know, have to say about it, whether I've missed something or whether they, you know, if they're hearing it completely different.
Yeah.
Or the same, or I just like people who are able to put stuff into prose that, you know, like they somehow describe it in a way that I wasn't able to describe it or hadn't thought of describing it.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I mean, I know different people are way into, like, I know there's certain people who are really into like wanting to know like the factual things, like where it was recorded,
Yeah.
who was the producer, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I know people, certain people who are very big, gearheads and studio tech type people, they want to know like the more about the process of how it was done.
Yeah.
And I guess to each his own, but they're each their own. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm just kind of, I don't know. I just at this point, I just kind of like something that's well written.
Yeah.
Which is why I stick to, the decibels and the metal hammers and, like the old reliable print magazines that have like people who have been doing it for a long time and have that history, because I've developed whatever kind of reader writer relationship with them, whether I know their tastes or not. Like, whether I share taste with them or not. So it's like if somebody has a similar taste to me and they're writing about whatever, and I can be like, get into it or empathize or understand or whatever. And it's the same thing with somebody whose tastes are completely opposite of mine and they're writing about so and so, and I can be like, oh, okay, cool. This is, it might sound like something I want to check out, even though like I don't normally like anything that this guy or girl or pumps or pimps or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So there you go. I don't know. I mean,
I'd agree with you.
Also,
like,
I must confess that I'm really far behind in my reading, like in terms of like everything I get comes to me and it's like in orderly fashion. I read it in the order that I get it. But right now, I literally just read like the issue of Decibel that had like Midnight on the cover, and like that Midnight record's been out for how long now?
like 8 months.
Yeah, like that's how
If
far
not
behind
longer.
I am in terms of like all my reading. So I'm
Nice.
I'm reading reviews that are like, there's no real like release anticipation to them. I'm reading stuff like that's been out for months, and I still enjoy it. I'm just like, that's my own fault for being, so far behind and whatever.
So you think Decibel and Metal Hammer basically are like the two standards you would say for reviews then?
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I what I have noticed is that a fair number of the newer magazines are sort of don't have review sections at all anymore.
Revolver
don't.
Well, they didn't last time I looked. That was like a few months ago.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. Like
they just did all. Yeah.
Revolver, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, in that sense too, sometimes it's just interesting. You can get a vibe about what a band is all about or an artist is all about by reading, a well-written story or an in-depth interview. Yeah, I mean, as far as reviews go, I would say Decibel is probably my go-to.
Yeah,
has been since the beginning. To a lesser extent, Zero Tolerance.
no
No
comment.
That
No
wasn't
comment.
A positive.
That wasn't.
that
wasn't a positive.
That didn't sound positive at all.
No, I mean, you're good, you're good, Kevin. I'll give you props.
I don't know about that, but I know. I mean, they have a very extensive review section.
They do. They're okay. Let me clarify. There are some reviewers in that magazine that I would not say I enjoy reading, but I'm not going to say which ones, obviously. But there are some that are quite good. And I'm going to get flagged by Zero Tolerance now. I can just feel it. But whatever.
Never reviewing any of your artists again, Curtis.
Whatever.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Kevin has to stick up for me now.
Who else? I mean, I do some online reviews and stuff, so that's not really a magazine, but like
I still really like some reviewers on Angry Metal Guy. I still really like reading their stuff. So
they're actually not bad. They just get too angry is the problem.
That's why it's fun though. It's kind of a shtick.
Yeah. Do you know Angry Metal Guy, Kevin? Do you know what we're talking about?
Not very well. I know of it.
Okay.
That's another thing too, man. I can't keep up with
Fair.
Everything that's out there. I just
Fair.
Like we were saying earlier, there's only so many hours in a day, and it's limited to 24.
Yeah.
24 is a lot different now than it used to be.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, Angry Metal Guy is basically a roast site.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't sometimes they positively review stuff.
Once in the odd while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, we've gone off track, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
A bit.
bit.
We can get back on track. I'm gonna just paraphrase this quote because it's pretty long.
Sorry, did you want to get to this thing first about how a journalist listens to music that might be different from the average music, or do we kind of cover that?
That was I kind of phrased that a little bit differently, but yeah.
Okay.
Was there something on that topic that you didn't cover?
No,
We just talked about how there's like a lot more context when you're listening.
I think also it comes down to I mentioned the volume of stuff. I think also it's like, and this happens to everybody. I've had friends say to me, it's like, like they inadvertently, whether at first they realize it or not, they listen to stuff differently when they get tasked with a review, like especially newer reviewers. Or if they're writing for a new magazine or site where it's like, they're sort of feeling that pressure to impress, or it's like, the early days. So I think there's, like whatever that particular person is experiencing as part of their assignment goes into how they listen to it as well.
Yeah.
Whereas, like we're saying, average music can just throw it on and be like, yeah, this rocks. It's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
one thing I also wanted to mention just about what I've noticed with newer reviewers, at least, is that sometimes they will try to impress too much, if you get what I mean. Like they'll try to make themselves look cool, and they'll do actual disses just to make themselves look cool. Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't know if I've really noticed that. What
I've
I
seen
have
it online.
noticed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, but what I have noticed is that sometimes you have people who, I guess because, like if you get an assignment for a print magazine, which obviously has limited amount of space.
Yeah.
You get 1 or 2 reviews assigned to you for that month. I find that sometimes newer people it's almost like they're trying to cram in like every single thought they have because it's like so limited, and it's like sometimes it gets scattershot.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, well, pick a lane and stick in it kind of thing, where it's like, but at the same time, I understand that because you don't know if you're going to be able to have this voice again or for how long you're going to have it. So you kind of want your shit out there, basically.
Yeah.
So there you go. I don't know. That's just some.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful feedback for people who are in music journalism. That's like the mind of editing your review. Like you can have all these thoughts, but like,
right. I think that
digestible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that it's just because I have X amount of years of experience doesn't mean that I'm immune to it. I mean, just recently I had some shit of mine edited, rightfully so, because it's like, I'm not going to get into it, but it was just like, okay, well, so-and-so chopped up this bits and pieces of it because I think they were probably right. And I just, for whatever reason, it just slipped by my own personal thing, but that's what editing's for, right? That's what editors are for. Like, hopefully save your ass once in a while. So there you go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. That's a shout out to the guy who did it.
Nice.
All right. Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, we were kind of talking about this earlier. Maybe I will read it because I can't articulate it as well as the author. He says that, quote, as a rule, it will be found that writers on music are divided into 2 classes and that neither of these classes can do much good. Too often they are either pedants or rhapsodists. This division is wholly natural. Music has many sides and is a science as well as an art. Its scientific side is that on which the pedant generally approaches it. He is concerned with forms and rules, with externals, to the forgetting of that which is inexpressibly nobler and higher. But the pedants are not harmful because they're not interesting. Strictly speaking, they do not write for the public at all, but only for their professional colleagues. The harmful men are the foolish rhapsodists who take advantage of the fact that the language of music is indeterminate and evanescent to talk about the art in such a way as to present themselves as persons of exquisite sensibilities rather than to direct attention to the real nature and beauty of music itself. Unquote.
Interesting.
That's kind of what Curtis was talking about earlier, was it
Yeah.
not?
Yep. 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 So what's the question, Alia? That
I
was a
just
lot.
Yeah, well, it's a lot, but it's not that much. It's like there's two kinds of music reviewers.
Yeah.
Technical,
Yep. Pedantic.
pedantic people, and then there's people that are like really flowery and just want to make themselves look like they know a lot and they have really good taste.
I also
Obviously,
think
I don't think.
Sorry, I was going to say, I also think that the second part of that quote, I don't know if I'm misinterpreting it, but it also seems that part of what he's saying there is also people who put themselves into their criticism.
Yep.
Which is something that everyone kind of does it, and there's a way to do it, that so that you're not sort of coming across as a wannabe tastemaker or wannabe know-it-all. But
Yeah.
I've had to coach many people over the years about writing reviews or doing whatever, but doing it more from the point of view of somebody like this is going to sound so, like, I don't know, arrogant or whatever.
No,
but
tell us.
The all-knowing sort of detached authority, as opposed to, I don't like death metal, so this new death metal record sucks and blah 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 blah. Like, if you're
Like
going to do this,
depersonifying it,
and
depersonifying it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that if you're going to do this to whatever professional degree, or even like just like we were talking about before, like the volume of degree, like you're going to encounter stuff you wouldn't necessarily listen to on radio. And we've talked about this before in previous podcasts, where it's like, you should be able to hear something and sort of say to yourself, okay, basically this is either good or bad, and this is why. Whether you would like that genre of music or whether you would listen to that in your free time or not, you should be able to, have a finely tuned enough ear to say, okay, there's a difference between, this and A and B, and this is why, or this is why A is good and this is why B is bad, even though it's the same genre. But I don't listen to that genre, so there you go. And yeah, I don't know. Is that making sense?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I was also taking it, I can see it from that viewpoint too, but I was also taking it where where the reviewer will make themselves the story. Do you know what I mean? Where like they talk about themselves, how they went to a show and blah 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 type of a thing.
And sometimes that's cool.
It can be, yeah. You've pulled it off well. You did. I've seen a few where you've done it well.
Yeah, I know there are people who do it well.
Yeah,
people who do it better than I do. And but the thing is, though, when you start doing that as part of your sort of, well, first of all, if that's like your only angle,
yeah, exactly. That's
20 reviews and that's your angle 20 times. Well, it's you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But also, what was I gonna say? Shit, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah, I can tell you what you were gonna say.
I don't know what I was gonna say.
Well, I kind of look at it from the viewpoint, like if you were doing a review of like, okay, so you're talking about, I don't know, Opeth, for example, and your whole review is all about first time you heard Opeth, times you've seen Opeth, and then you mentioned a little bit about the album at the end of it. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like,
yeah, totally. And like, sometimes, like I said, like sometimes it can be done well.
Yeah.
Overwrought, overdoing it that way is kind of not, because you're placing yourself into it as opposed to, you're highlighting yourself as opposed to highlighting what you're supposed to be talking
exactly.
about. Yeah. Granted, I mean, with the that's not the word, with the sort of glut of reissues that have come out over the course of the pandemic, it's hard, especially if you have a history with a record.
Yep.
And you're reviewing or writing about a reissue with like added bonus demo tracks and live whatever at a show you might have even been at.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, there's cause sometimes to put yourself into it.
Yep.
But like I said, not all the time, because it gets tiresome. And
I
mean, I think that also goes back to, let me look at the quote again, where it kind of goes back to where in some small way you are, where is it? writing to your colleagues or whatever it is.
Yeah. I don't
I think it was the first quote. Or I
Yeah,
don't know.
strictly speaking, they do not write for the public, but for the professional colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe not even that. Maybe you're just writing to who your audience or your own friends or something. I don't know.
I can think of
There's
a couple writers like that.
Detachment's a good word, Aaliyah. That's a good word for it. So there you go.
Now, one other thing I wanted to bring up, because this book was obviously written back when he's talking about critically writing about like symphony
Mhm.
stuff or instrumental music, a lot of that, and not so much, music with vocals or lyrics.
Or grindcore.
And I wrote this question before I thought about it, and I don't really think it's the case that people, I don't know. I wrote, does the fact that music have lyrics now take away from people and even journalists' desire to listen to the music in and of itself and critique the music in and of itself?
I saw that question. Sorry, I saw that question and I was kind of like, it's kind of weird because I'm not a big lyric person.
And I think that's kind of a lot of the case. Like people don't
but-
really care about.
Well, in heavier music, yes, I think
Yeah.
we're more sort of attuned to the sound of the voice as an instrument, as opposed to a lot of the time what they're saying. And granted, it's like, I don't want to like diss or minimize all the lyricists out there who put time and energy into it, because
important.
no, yeah, and there are great whatever, but I think that it just sort of goes with the genre. So if you on the other hand, if you look at a lot of indie rock reviewing and indie rock journalism, which I have done in the past, there is, and this is why I find it really difficult to get into a lot of indie rock journalism, but there's a huge, or at least there was at the time, like a big focus on lyrics and mentioning quotes of lyrics in reviews and in stories and stuff, and a big focus on what's being said. And I just never, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't listen to enough of the music to like really care, but that's one of the things I noticed. And I don't really, I used to write about jazz, but I'm not a big fan of vocal jazz. So I don't really know if vocal jazz gets the same treatment or if it's just indie. That's a particular thing to the world of indie rock. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you guys,
Interesting.
well, first of all, I don't know how much indie rock record
No, it's
reviewing
like my
you write
least
over the years.
favorite.
What's that?
It's like my least favorite genre.
Okay, so you
Some
probably
people
don't
hate
know, but
country,
yeah.
I hate indie rock.
I don't mind.
But I don't know if you've noticed that, Curtis. It's just like a lot of reviewing. Well, there are significant amounts of mentioning of lyrics.
I didn't really think about it until you mentioned it, but yes, I do see what you're saying.
And I guess in that world, there's an importance to it. Granted, yeah, I think that like what's this dude's name? Henry something?
Henry Edward Creville.
So I think he's talking about like instrumental, like you said, symphonies, orchestras, maybe like the beginnings of like, I don't even know, like how long would it take? Maybe not, because by the time this guy wrote a book out on like a primitive typewriter and got it mimeographed and all that kind of stuff, it was probably, he probably started writing it in like the 1870s for all we know. And there might not have been much vocal music, you know what I mean? Aside from opera.
Opera, exactly. That's the only thing I thought of. I was like, well,
Yeah.
operas existed, but
So anyway, I mean, yeah, it's and going back to the metal thing, it's like, yeah, I don't know if it's that much of a thing, really.
well, and I feel like of all of the genres, metal gets a treatment. It is one of the more parallel genres to classical music. Like there's a lot of that kind of sensibility about metal in my mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that it's funny you mentioned that. Now that we're on this topic, I'm just reminded of the fact that Jason, the vocalist for the band Origin, he told me he had like he's had a couple book ideas, and one of the ideas he had was just essentially what we're talking about how so much effort gets put into death metal lyrics and themes and concept records and all like the stuff that everyone thinks about, whether it's, you know, Hammer Smash Face or whatever, or like the space stuff that Origin does or whatever, but it's basically done for something that's for 90+% people is unintelligible and they're never going to bother reading. And just the sort of juxtaposition of that and like the irony of that. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great idea for a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I just
But I
have a
think the
side
artists do
comment.
that for themselves as well. So
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, but it's just kind of funny how you put in that much work and, you know, you think about, so, okay, you have your drums, your guitars, your bass, your vocals. Theoretically, that's 25% of, you know, of a song divided, or so a song divided 25%, 4 ways, whatever. And a full quarter of that gets pretty much ignored.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
like, you know, for what? For some, you know, for
unless it's bad, and then people will shit on it a lot.
yeah, well, yeah, that's true. But I guess that's not the intended reason some of these people do.
Yeah.
I wrote a song because I want to get shit on. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I guess
Yeah, I guess I thought it was really actually a very interesting conversation. And I like this topic, just thinking about things from a different perspective than we might usually think about it. I think as a musician, when we read negative reviews of our music, it can be very difficult to not take it personally
Mhm.
and to not feel wounded personally by people not. We might feel like people don't understand it, or we might feel like people are just being pretentious or something like that. And it's helpful, I think, to be able to think of it from a more detached perspective as well as a musician. So I don't know if you think of one
Sorry,
thing that musicians.
sorry,
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, I the idea of taking stuff like that, I mean, I can understand somebody sort of being like, oh, this person didn't get it, or this, you know, or being sour because somebody's kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, shit on their art, so to speak. But the idea of taking it personally, I've never, maybe it's just me, but I've never really understood that, because unless you know someone personally, like why are you taking the review or the opinion of somebody who lives on the other side of the country or another country or whatever, who you don't know at all? Why is that suddenly such, like, why is it sort of taken personally? Or maybe we're just,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
not
maybe I'm
really
just splitting
rational,
hairs,
but,
maybe I'm just splitting
you know.
hairs on the term. I don't know, but
Well, just from my own opinion, Kevin, just from what I've seen, since I've had to deal with a lot of bands who do take it personally, it's when the reviewer gets kind of nasty and makes cracks versus taking an objective approach is when that happens, in my experience.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a bad
Isn't some of
review.
that shit funny though?
It can be. No, it can be. But I mean, it's like a good example is we had a client, I think it was about a year ago. I'm not going to say who it was. And the review was like they were tearing into the person's looks. They were just it was just nasty. You could tell the writer had a bad day that day and they were just fucking venting on somebody, right? So they took it personally in that case. And I can understand it. Like when you're getting into like personal attacks like that, like, oh
yeah, no, that's not necessarily the stuff I'm talking about. I'm just
Fair.
talking about whatever, like some kind of like a review that's negative or something that the artist doesn't necessarily agree with. I'm not talking about outright.
That's different.
I make cracks about stuff all the time, but I make cracks about cliches.
Yeah, exactly.
I
don't
think it's
think
because sometimes musicians can attach themselves to their art, and it is like an embodiment of themselves. And so
absolutely
part of it.
100%. But I don't understand. You know, And I'm not saying this out of like complete ignorance, because I've been in bands that have been reviewed badly, and I
I'm
wrote a
sure.
book that was reviewed, good and bad.
Yeah.
So it's cool. I thought some of the stuff, some of the stuff was like, oh, very justified in the negativity, or some of the stuff was, I never thought of it like that, or yeah, this person is ripping on me or bandmate or us, and it's actually kind of funny.
It also depends upon the person's,
That's
their own,
personality.
their personality. Like,
I understand, a lot of artists are sensitive and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, and we all are kind of,
Yeah.
we don't want to get shit on in our own sort of community away from the mainstream. I get that too, but
exactly.
I guess I understand in some ways, and I don't understand in other ways, and maybe that makes me like kind of dumb, but
No,
No.
I'm the same with that. There's a band called Coil Guns who I used to work for. They're like more on the
that
noise
band from
end.
Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, but a lot of people hated them because they're kind of more like in the noise direction, right? So every time they got a bad review, they thought it was the funniest thing in the fucking world, and they would just meme it. They post it on Instagram with a quote and like a funny meme, and they just thought it was the greatest thing, and they'd use it for self-promotion. Those guys could take it. They just were like, yeah, whatever, I'll have some fun with it. But other bands will be like, cry, never, now they want to quit. So yeah, it's the personality.
Right. Like some people will just want to stop making music because they feel like they put all this effort into something.
Yeah.
And it was just as bad as they feared it was.
Yeah.
Because they're
Coil Guns, meanwhile, fucking A, let's post it. I fucking love it. And half the time the journalists
we've talked about how to deal with negative reviews before, and I like that perspective. I like the memeing.
But here's what I thought was funny is a lot of times the journalists would get upset that they were memed. The guy that wrote the bad review. Yeah. That was the funny part.
God, you publicized this review I wrote for the public to see.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I thought was the funny part. So the reviewer was kind of getting.
Why aren't you taking my opinion seriously?
Exactly. Anyways, I'll shut up about that. But I thought it was funny.
So in the context of your, I guess since you're the only one here who's in a band, Aaliyah, when it comes to reading stuff or coming across stuff that good or bad, do you have are there widely varying sort of what's the word, not opinions, but widely like sort of feelings or approaches or just sort of like responses to the stuff you've read about your own band? Like,
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been really dramatically negative and really dramatically positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly feel like the stuff that's more middle of the road is the most legitimate. Stuff that seems a little bit more rational and
no. What I meant was within your band members themselves. So say for example, you get a gloriously positive review. Are there very noticeable differences within the members of how they respond to that, or a fucking lambasting? Like, are there people who are able to laugh it off or brush it off easier?
Well, yeah, because
and then do you have like these interband discussions about like
100%? Yeah.
Okay.
We do that, and I mean that's natural because there's one songwriter in the band, and so the people that aren't the songwriters are not going to take it personally.
Okay.
So they're able to laugh at it and kind of help bring things center. And yeah, we have those discussions for sure. I would imagine most bands do.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Unless they're like one-man projects or something like that.
One-man band arguing with himself about some review he got.
In Messenger, he has 2 accounts. Anyway. So yeah, anything that we should wrap this up with?
Let's see.
Takeaways.
I'm just looking to make sure we didn't miss anything in your original notes there. No, I don't know. I mean, did we find a middle ground analysis and?
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. I guess the question, because it was associated to this idea that there's the pedantic approach and then there's like the flowery approach. And how do you find that middle ground and address the meaningfulness in the music?
How? I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know how you
It's kind of a
would.
big question. I mean, but whatever you have to say.
I
about
think,
it.
you know what though? I think that there, okay. I think, I don't know, it's weird because I would be interested to see how this particular, the guy who wrote this book, like what he considered good criticism or proper criticism. And then so he has that sort of idea of what it is. Is that all he wants? Like, is he not open to the idea that, okay, we can have a person be critical in a flowery, self-referential way, but we can also have people who are like, very, very fact-based by the book, or we can have people who are in the middle, or we can have people who are talking, stream of consciousness, whatever. And it's, the variety of it's cool. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if I'd want to read the same sort of style of review or whatever, page after page after page, like the same thing. It's not like, I don't know, man. I mean, does it come down to the basic of variety is the spice of life? Is it that simple? I don't know.
Perhaps. A disclaimer that I didn't mention is, I mean, all of these quotes are from the very first chapter. I haven't gotten deep into this book, and I think he probably goes into more detail about examples of how to write and stuff like that. But that's a good question. And I mean, what do you think? You think about that, like, you want to have variety, but is there like an absolute, this is good journalism and this is not good journalism? Like, is it possible to tell
Good question.
objectively?
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I would say yes, but I would also say that it's difficult to sort of say, okay, well, here's an example right off the top of my head, or here's an example.
Right. And
It's
difficult
one
to
of those things that
articulate.
it's like, I guess it's like music. You know it when you hear it, or you know it when you read it, and somebody else is going to think it's great. Somebody else is going to think it's hack bullshit. I don't know.
Yeah, fair.
That's not exactly the concrete answer that I guess the world is looking for, but I think there's so much middle ground in for everything. Like any topic that you choose, there's always like, that side and whatever in the middle, like, whether it's, whatever it is. And I think I like to think that there's room for everything. Because,
Well, because there's all kinds of people.
there are all kinds of people. And also, I mean, you don't know, I think it was King Diamond who originally said it when I read it in a magazine when I was a kid, where he's like, well, of course we're evil, but of course Merciful Fate is evil, because but you wouldn't know we were evil unless you had good. You need, if everything was just evil, then it would be like, all right, well, this is what it is, and then whatever. But if you have like what you consider good, and you have the opposite force working against it, then there's that back and forth, there's that dynamic, there's that, whatever, the thing on each side and the middle ground, and there you go. I guess with everything
How
else,
to tell the sunlight without the shadows.
there you go. You wouldn't know what dark was if you didn't have light, and you wouldn't know what light was if you didn't have dark, and whatever. There you go.
And on that brilliant, timeless philosophical note, I think it's a good time to bring this episode to a close.
All right. Cool.
Did you have something else you want to say? Sorry to
Me?
interrupt.
No, I'm good. No.
All right. Well, hopefully this was
Read the next chapter. We can talk about it next time.
okay. Okay.
Listen to the next chapter or whatever you're doing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm listening. I will like definitely bring it forward if I find some more little golden nuggets I want to talk about. So thank you so much. Yeah, it was good chat. Until next time, everyone, make like a bull and throw those horns up.